Rain slid down the glass windows of a small cafe in Brooklyn, like the sky was washing away the city's forgotten promises. Arya stared at the door, heart pounding, nervously smoothing the hem of her simple skirt. What if he's just another guy looking for fun? She wondered, forcing a half smile. Across the room, Connor Wells watched the same moment unfold, but with different fears. The fear of being found out. "Are you Arya?" he asked, taking off his cap and revealing grey-blue eyes that seemed to hide more than they revealed. "Yes. And you're—" "Connor?" she replied, her voice trembling slightly. That first glance felt like time had frozen. The dreamy waitress and the disguised CEO sat face to face, steaming coffee cups between them, and a world of lies about to unfold. He wore a plain grey sweater, intentionally brandless. She wore a floral dress that smelled faintly of lavender and hope. "So, what do you do for a living?" Arya asked, tossing in a playful tone to break the ice. Connor hesitated. The seconds stretched longer than they should have. "I'm a manager. At a food company," he lied, not ready to admit he owned the kind of corporation that could swallow her entire world. She smiled, visibly relieved. "No way! I work at a diner. I love cooking. I love serving real people." The conversation flowed more naturally than either of them expected. They laughed about their childhoods, shared little traumas and big dreams. Arya revealed she dreamed of opening her own restaurant someday. Connor was touched, but didn't show it. When their hands brushed, reaching for the same napkin, the accidental touch sparked a quiet electric tension. The imaginary camera zooms in, fingers lingering near each other, eyes locked in something bigger than coincidence. Outside, thunder rolled, but inside that cafe, silence took over. A silence pulsing with a spark and a secret. "You're different," she said softly. "Most guys talk about money or power, but you seem more real." Connor glanced away and gave a crooked smile, but inside, guilt was already creeping in. He wasn't just a manager. He was the CEO of Wells Culinary, and she worked at one of the restaurants his company was about to shut down. What he was about to do could destroy everything. Have you ever felt like someone was hiding something big from you? Ever loved someone who started with a lie? Drop a comment below, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories that tug at your heart. New York doesn't sleep. It roars. It glows. But for those living paycheck to paycheck with dreams tucked into an apron, the city can be brutal. Arya wakes before sunrise, ties her hair with a worn-out elastic band, and stares into the cracked bathroom mirror. Her eyes, puffy from another restless night, can't hide her exhaustion, but they also don't dim the fire still burning inside her. "It's gonna be a good day," she whispers to herself like a mantra, then grabs her recipe notebook, the one she guards like a piece of her soul, and heads out. Across the city on the 35th floor of a glass tower, Connor buttons up a flawless suit and silently watches the acquisition meeting unfold. Wells Culinary, the empire he inherited and expanded, is about to take over dozens of small restaurants, including the Rose Diner, where Arya works. He knows the name, the smell, the face that greets him, but nobody in that room knows that. "Connor, we need to be strategic. These places are too sentimental. They're soft spots in our growth," says Ethan, his partner, tweaking the graphs on the big screen. "Feelings don't pay dividends," adds Scarlett, recently rehired as a corporate consultant, with a sly smile that hides darker motives. Connor nods, pretending to care. But inside, something's off. Arya keeps echoing in his mind, her honest eyes, her coffee-stained hands, her dreams served on simple plates. He closes his eyes for a beat and sees himself, not as a CEO, but as a man lying to a woman who might lose everything because of him. Meanwhile, over at the Rose Diner, the space is tight, but the smell of bacon and fresh pies fills the air with warmth. Arya darts between tables, delivering practiced smiles and letting out a few quiet sighs. She doesn't know why that date hit her so hard, but something about that man, that Connor, felt different. "You're going to the next one, right?" asked Rosie, her best friend, wiping down the counter. "He said he wants to see you again." "I think so," Arya replies, trying to hide the spark in her eyes. The TV in the corner plays a segment about Wells' Culinary. The headline reads, "Company announces major expansion. Older restaurants at risk." Arya turns down the volume and mutters, "They never get it. These places, they're more than food, they're life." Back at the office, Ethan shoots Connor a text. "Go to the blind date. Be real for once." Connor reads it, takes a deep breath, and replies, "I already did." But how long can he pretend to be just another guy when the truth might tear apart everything she holds dear? The Rose Diner's kitchen looked like any ordinary backroom to a distracted customer. But to Arya, it was sacred ground. Surrounded by bubbling pots and the buttery scent of warm bread, she felt whole. She danced alone while chopping vegetables, softly humming the lullabies her mother used to sing, though now her mother's voice was only a memory. "One day, the world will see who I really am," she whispered, scribbling another recipe into her worn-out notebook. The daughter of immigrants who died when she was still a teen, Arya had bounced between shelters and odd jobs. She never had a safe haven. But she'd learned to turn pain into flavor. Every dish she made had soul, like she was offering a piece of her own heart with every bite. Her dream was simple: open a small, cozy restaurant where people would feel at home the second they walked in. But rent was overdue, the fridge was nearly empty, and the extra shifts at the diner weren't enough. Arya barely slept, worked endlessly, and still smiled, because deep down she believed that every little act, a free dessert for a sad customer, a flower left on the counter, planted hope in a world that had forgotten how to slow down. "You ever think about giving up?" Rosie asked one night, watching Arya flip the lights off. "Every single day," Arya admitted without blinking. "But then I remember my mum used to say, the strongest people are the ones who keep going, even when no one's watching." Somewhere between exhaustion and routine, her date with Connor felt like a breath from another world. She tried to brush it off, pretend she wasn't charmed. After all, guys like him, even so-called managers, didn't fall for waitresses who wrote dreams in notebooks. That night, curled up on a makeshift couch with patched-up cushions, Arya hugged her notebook to her chest. It held recipes, yes, but also secrets, pain, bits of her childhood, and even a letter she never sent to the father who walked out. It was her diary, in disguise, her story, written in flavors. "Can someone really see all that, just by looking into my eyes?" she whispered to the ceiling. The next morning, Rosie woke her with a teasing grin. "He texted, wants to see you again." Arya hesitated. Memories of past letdowns hit hard. Men who pretended to care, then vanished the moment they learned her story. But this felt different, like maybe, just maybe, it was worth the risk. She closed the notebook gently, and right then a single tear slipped down her cheek. What if, this time, someone dared to dream with her? The sun had barely risen when Arya arrived at the diner and found the manager, Mr. Benson, standing with his arms crossed and a heavy look on his face. His voice was blunt. "Arya, I have to be honest. I've been hearing rumors. Word is, Wells' Culinary is negotiating to buy up this whole block. If that's true, we might be on borrowed time." She froze. A chill ran down her spine. This place was her second home, where she learned to grow, to survive, to cook from the soul. But nobody told us. That's just talk, right? For now. "But you should be ready," he said before disappearing back into the office. And Arya stood there alone, coffee still brewing behind her, a storm brewing inside her. Meanwhile, Connor was fighting his own battle. Back-to-back meetings, investors demanding tougher moves, and a ghost from his past walking back in like she'd never left. Scarlett returned with her usual calculated grace, high heels clicking down the corridor like warning bells. "I'm here to save your company, darling," she announced as she entered the boardroom like it was a stage. "And maybe win back what's mine." Connor didn't get a chance to respond. His phone buzzed with a message from Arya. "Coffee at the park today?" He smiled. For the first time that day, he felt peace. At the park, under string lights swaying between trees, Arya had set up a small makeshift picnic. Connor showed up late, holding simple flowers and an apologetic look in his eyes. They laughed, shared apple pie, and swapped childhood stories. For the first time in years, Arya felt safe. "You're not like the other guys," she said. "You don't talk about money or status. You actually listen." He almost choked. He wanted to tell her so badly. Wanted to admit he was a CEO, that his company was the storm looming over her world. But the fear of losing this, her, held him back. "Sometimes hiding feels easier than disappointing someone," he replied, the words heavy with double meaning. Back at the office, Scarlett scrolled through photos on her phone, Connor and Arya at the park, laughing, holding hands, her eyes hardened. She knew she had to act. Before that romance threatened everything she still wanted to control. And she had the tools to do it. Later that evening, Arya served a brand new dish at the diner, one inspired by Connor. Loyal customers applauded her. But behind her smile, she could feel the floor shifting beneath her feet. "Something wasn't right," Rosie noticed. "You're glowing, but it's like you're bracing for impact." Arya didn't answer. She just stared out the window and whispered, "Maybe I am." Lily says, "But what if that impact comes from the very person she's learning to love?" Weeks passed with a lightness Arya had never known. Connor had slipped into her routine like a melody. Quiet notes scribbled on napkins, coffee shared before shifts, and late nights spent listening to jazz in tucked-away bars across the city. It felt like the world had paused, just long enough to let her dream. "I never thought someone like you would walk into my life like this," she whispered one night, leaning on his shoulder on the balcony of her apartment. "Sometimes I think I'll wake up and find out it was all in my head." Connor just held her tighter, but guilt pulled at his chest like an invisible rope. He wanted to tell her, he needed to, but with every smile she gave him, with every dish she created full of hope, the fear only grew stronger. Back at the office, Ethan noticed the change. "You've changed, man. You're softer. This have a name?" Connor looked away. Scarlett, on the other hand, didn't have to ask. She knew, and it only made her more determined to cut things off at the root. "A waitress? Seriously, Connor? You're going to throw your reputation away for someone who doesn't even know who you are?" "She knows me better than you ever did," he snapped, walking out of the meeting room, leaving her speechless for the first time. Meanwhile, completely unaware of the storm brewing overhead, Arya prepared a special dish just for Connor, caramelized lemon-lavender chicken. The recipe had been her grandmother's, but the finishing touch, that was his. "I made this for you," she said, placing the plate gently on the diner counter, cheeks flushed with emotion. He tasted it in silence, and the flavor hit harder than he expected, not because of the seasoning, but because of the shame. This is one of the most incredible things I've ever tasted," he whispered, but he didn't have the courage to say what he was about to confess. On the way out, he stopped in front of a massive Wells Culinary billboard with the slogan, "Turning tradition into something extraordinary." And there, in the reflection of the diner's window, he saw two versions of himself. On one side, the simple man Arya had come to love. On the other, the CEO who might end up destroying everything she'd worked for. Back inside, Rosie watched Arya with gentle concern. "You're really falling for him, huh? I know it sounds crazy, but he sees me. He hears me. With him, I don't have to pretend." Rosie hesitated, then smiled. "Just promise me you'll keep your eyes open." And Arya promised, not knowing that outside the real world was closing in, like a wave ready to crash. When the tide rises, will love float or drown? Connor started showing up at the Rose Diner almost every day, blending in with the usual customers. Disguised, he'd even jump in to help wash dishes just to stay close to her. They cooked together between bursts of laughter and clouds of flour, and Arya never suspected that the sweet manager by her side had an entire team waiting for him just a few blocks away. "Look at you, actually working the kitchen," Rosie teased one afternoon, watching them from the corner. But behind the playful tone, her eyes studied Connor closely. Something didn't add up. As Arya watched a love bloom she never dared to imagine, Connor carried silent doubts and quiet promises. He was falling for every part of her, the way she danced between tables, how she comforted heartbroken customers with warm cake and kind words. But with every truth he held back, he drifted a little further from deserving her. Scarlett, meanwhile, was tightening her grip at the company. With her signature venomous charm, she accelerated the expansion plans and made sure to move the Rose Diner to the very top of the acquisition list. She knew this would shake Connor. It was the perfect move. "You're obsessed with this woman. You're forgetting who you are, Connor," she hissed, slamming the diner's demolition contract on his desk. "I know exactly who I am. That's what scares me," he replied, ripping the contract in half but pocketing the doubts anyway. Elsewhere, Arya received exciting news. She'd been selected to participate in the local Flavors Festival, a citywide food fair that drew media attention. It was her first real shot at showing the world what she could do. At the festival, Connor stood proudly by her side, mesmerized by the way she lit up under the soft glow of the stage lights. Arya served her childhood recipe, told stories with her eyes, and left the judges visibly moved. At the end of the night, the two danced between food stands, while the New York sky seemed for once on her side. But in the shadows, Scarlett watched. She took photos, recorded videos, and whispered to herself, "This won't last." Outside the tent, Rosie pulled Connor aside. "Do you love her?" He swallowed hard. "More than anything. Then please, don't be the one who breaks her." That night, Arya fell asleep with a light heart, dreaming of a future filled with flavor and love. But not all ingredients go together, and the recipe of fate still held a bitter taste. It was just another morning at the diner, the smell of fresh coffee in the air, and the familiar soundtrack of regulars laughing in their usual booths. Arya was plating a special dish, her heart racing with excitement. She couldn't wait to tell Connor she'd been invited to interview at a prestigious restaurant. She wanted to see the pride in his eyes. She wanted to share the dream, but the world was about to fall apart before the first bite. "Guys, turn up the TV," Rosie shouted, pointing at the old screen hanging in the corner. The report had hit every major channel. Wells Culinary announces acquisition of local businesses. CEO Connor Wells goes live to unveil company's new phase. Arya froze. The plate slipped from her hands and shattered on the floor in slow motion, along with her heart. The broken pieces reflected more than porcelain. They reflected betrayal. "Connor Wells?" she whispered like she was saying the name of a stranger. "No, this can't be real." There he was, clear as day, elegant, live, speaking with confidence, talking about expansion, talking about efficiency, talking about inevitable closures. The face she knew so well, the voice that used to lull her to sleep with a smile. And there, he was someone else entirely. That afternoon, Connor walked into the diner, his chest still tight, hoping to explain, but Arya was waiting, already standing, eyes ablaze. "You lied to me from the very beginning," she shouted, no filter. "You said you hated powerful people. You said you were just a manager, and the whole time, you were the one destroying everything I love." "Arya, I tried. I was going to tell you." He stepped forward, But you didn't, because you knew I'd never trust you again. And guess what? You were right. She shoved him toward the door. Connor stepped out onto the sidewalk just as rain started falling, soaking him to the bone, like the universe had decided to cry with her. He didn't say another word. He just stood there, watching the door close, truly alone for the first time. That night, Arya cried until there was nothing left. She sat on the kitchen floor, clutching her recipe notebook. But the pain didn't come only from betrayal. It came from something else, something she'd found out just hours earlier. She was pregnant. Staring at the pharmacy test, trembling in her hands, she whispered, "I can't tell him. Not now. He'll think I'm manipulating him, that I want his money." Across the city, Connor wandered the streets without a coat, without an umbrella, without direction. Rain streamed down his face like it was trying to wash away the shame. At one corner, he kicked a soaked newspaper. The headline screamed, "Wells Culinary swallows up another block. Who's next?" But neither of them knew yet that this baby would be the spark to light a new fire, or burn everything to the ground. The days that followed were silent. At the Rose Diner, Arya kept her head down, her heart broken. Her tired eyes gave away the sleepless nights. Still, she smiled at customers, served each plate with care, and hid the small bump that carried her enormous secret. Rosie noticed. She always did. "You okay?" she asked, a little sweeter than usual. "Just tired," Arya replied, avoiding her gaze. Lying to others was easy. Lying to herself, not so much. At home, her recipe notebook now held pages stained with tears. She wrote obsessively, like the ink might heal her. New dishes, menu ideas for the restaurant she still dreamed of, even if it never existed. Somehow, she still believed. Meanwhile, Connor was trapped in his own kind of chaos. He'd discovered Scarlett had forged documents, rushed through projects, and deliberately added the Rose Diner to the closure list behind his back. This wasn't just corporate betrayal, it was personal. "You ruined everything," he said, staring her down in the office. "I just took off your mask for you," Scarlett replied coolly. "But you can still fix this. Drop the fairy tale. Go back to who you were." But Connor wasn't that man anymore. Days later, quietly, he purchased the Rose Diner building under a false name. The plan was simple: preserve the space, renovate it, and give Arya the chance she deserved, without his name, without his shadow, just the place, and a promise. He left a handwritten note in her locker. "Sometimes life breaks us so we can rebuild. This place still has a future. You still have a future. From someone who believes in you." Arya read it, crumpled it, tossed it in the trash. She didn't believe in promises anymore, especially not the kind that hid behind cowardice. Elsewhere, Scarlett met Ethan at a high-end bar, toasting to her victory, still unaware that Connor was quietly cutting her out of every decision behind the scenes. "He thinks he can erase me?" She smirked, her eyes ice-cold. "I'm not done." Meanwhile, Arya kept fighting, working double shifts, saving every spare penny, scribbling dreams on the backs of napkins. Because now, it wasn't just for her. It was for the new life growing inside her, and for a dream that, despite everything, still had a heartbeat. On a cold night, she laid her head on the empty diner counter, exhausted, one hand on her belly, and she whispered, "I don't know what's gonna happen to us, but you deserve a mom who fights till the very end, and maybe that fight is only just beginning." The rumors started as whispers. Quiet comments from customers at the diner, sideways glances, muffled gossip. Arya pretended not to hear, but every word chipped away at the little piece she had left. "They say she got pregnant by that CEO just to cash in. Bet he doesn't even know. She's probably waiting for the right moment to trap him." Rosie, furious, confronted the accusations head-on. But Arya didn't. She stayed silent, out of fear, out of shame, out of not knowing who she could trust anymore. High above the city, in the Wells culinary penthouse, Connor received an unexpected visit. Scarlett, smirking, holding an envelope in her hand. "If you're so determined to protect her, maybe you should know everything." Inside the envelope, a copy of Arya's pregnancy test and a torn letter she had once started to write but never sent. A letter where she tried to find the words to tell him the truth. "Where did you get this?" he snapped. "Let's just say some truths fall right into my lap. So tell me, Connor, you still think your little waitress deserves a crown?" His expression darkened. This wasn't protection. This was violation. It was war. He fired Scarlett on the spot. No hesitation. But the damage was done. That same day, Connor went to the diner. Not as a CEO, not as a man in love, but as someone searching for the truth. He carried an envelope. Inside, the contract showing he had bought the building and transferred full ownership to Arya, free of charge. A gesture of restitution. "Read it. Before you hate me forever," he said, placing it on the counter. She looked at him, eyes full of fear, wounded pride, and love. A love that hadn't died, even if she wanted to believe it had. "You can't just buy my forgiveness. You don't get to decide for me." "I'm not trying to buy anything. I'm just trying to give back what I took from you," he said, voice steady, raw with sincerity. Arya picked up the envelope, hands trembling. Inside were the documents. The building was hers. The space was hers. The dream was now possible, but her heart, that was still in ruins. At the end of her shift, she sat alone at a corner table, staring at the papers. Tears spilled, not just from surprise, but from doubt. "If I accept this, what does that say about me?" Rosie appeared, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "It says you don't give up. It says you're stronger than the story they tried to write for you." But the choice Arya would make that night would change everything. It was supposed to be the last day of the Rose Diner. Chairs were half-packed. Regulars dropped by quietly to say goodbye, and Arya served coffee with a lump in her throat. The contract was in her backpack, but her heart hadn't decided. Outside, something unusual drew attention. A black car pulled up in front of the diner. Connor stepped out, wearing a simple suit, eyes resolute, and walked in without waiting for permission. He held a sheet of paper in one hand and wore his heart on his sleeve. "Wait, what's he doing here?" Rosie whispered, dropping a tray. Arya froze in the middle of the room. Every eye turned toward him. Customers, co-workers, friends. Connor climbed onto one of the tables like it was a stage. He took a deep breath. "My name is Connor Wells, and I'm the CEO of the company that nearly destroyed this place." Silence. Total. Even the clink of coffee cups had stopped. "But I'm also the man who fell in love with this woman without knowing she carried the weight of the world on her back. And even after I found out, I kept falling. For who she is. For who she refuses to stop being." Arya was shaking. She didn't know whether to run, cry, or scream. Today, this building will not be demolished because it belongs to her now, because she deserves more than profit. She deserves a beginning, and if she'll have me, I want to build that beginning with her. A quiet stir moved through the diner. People exchanged emotional glances. "And the baby?" someone asked, loud and direct. Connor stepped off the table, walked toward Arya, and gently took her hand. "I know. And I don't care how much time I lost. I'm here now, and I'm staying if you'll let me." Before Arya could answer, the diner doors slammed open. Scarlett stormed in, holding a stack of papers, fury in her eyes. "This is all a scam. She planned this. I have messages, emails, proof." Before anyone could react, Rosie stepped forward. "Then let's show everything." She tossed a folder onto the counter, full of screenshots and damning emails. "Especially the ones you sent trying to sabotage this place out of jealousy." Scarlett's face drained of color. She tried to speak, but backed down. No one in the room believed her anymore. She walked out in silence. Arya looked at Connor. His eyes were glassy, raw, real. "How can I ever trust you?" she whispered. He reached into his pocket and placed a key in her hand, the key to the diner, to the future. "I don't know if I can convince you, but I want to earn it. Day by day, your dream, it's mine now too." She cried, not from pain, but from release. And maybe, for the first time, she had the chance to choose love and choose her future. Months had passed since the day Connor stood on that table and bared his soul. The Rose Diner had been reborn, this time with a new name etched in simple, elegant lettering, Grace's Table. It wasn't just a restaurant anymore. It was a symbol of resilience, of tenderness, and of second chances. Arya walked through the newly renovated kitchen with steady steps. She wore an apron embroidered with her name and the name of the little girl growing inside her. Her belly was now visible beneath her soft dress, and her face glowed with a serenity she hadn't felt in years. "Chef Arya, lines out the door," Rosie shouted, now the proud manager of the place. "Tell them it's worth the wait," Arya replied, smiling with quiet pride. Connor had changed too. He restructured Wells Culinary from the inside out, shutting down predatory contracts and opening doors for community chefs, neighborhood diners, and voices that had long been ignored. It wasn't about profit anymore. It was about purpose. At investor meetings, he no longer wore expensive ties or hid behind buzzwords. He spoke with passion. He talked about Arya, about Grace's Table, about food that heals, and about people no one used to notice. "We don't just serve plates, we tell stories," he'd say, eyes shining. They'd learned how to communicate, with honesty. Sure, they argued, they disagreed, but there was listening, repair, respect. Arya still had moments of doubt, echoes from old wounds, but Connor proved every day that he wasn't going anywhere. During renovations, they found an old letter tucked between the floorboards, written by one of the original Rose Diner owners. It spoke of hope, legacy, and food as a language of love. Arya had it framed and hung at the entrance. On the official reopening night, Grace's Table was packed. Soft jazz played in the background, warm lights glowed above every table, and the smell of rosemary bread lingered in the air. Arya stepped out of the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron, where Connor waited with a small envelope in hand. "Someone left this for you," he said, handing it over. Inside was a handwritten note. "Your mother would be proud. Keep serving love." Arya froze. Her heart skipped. There was no signature, but the handwriting, it was familiar. A chill ran down her spine. "Connor, someone knew about her. About my mom. Then we'll find out together," he said, lacing his fingers with hers. That night, she made a dish in her mother's honor, mint lentil soup with fresh bread. She served it smiling even as silent tears rolled down her cheeks. But the past still held something waiting to be revealed. And it would come with the birth of a new life. 2 years later, Grace was here. The restaurant thrived. The kitchen buzzed with energy, and the laughter of a little girl echoed through the halls like background music. Arya carried her daughter on her hip while showing a new employee how to finish a dish with a pinch of flaky salt. "Right here," she said, nodding with her elbow. "This is what makes the difference. It's the detail that tells the story." Connor arrived moments later, holding Rosie's hand, now Grace's godmother. He brought flowers and fresh bread, like he did every Friday. The suit was long gone, replaced with rolled-up sleeves and soft shirts. The CEO had become a father, a partner, a real man. They were married right there at Grace's Table on a sunny Sunday with the whole street blocked off and neighbors invited. The decorations were simple: string lights, colorful dishes, and framed photos of both their mothers on the walls. Nothing flashy, everything meaningful. That same week, an article about the restaurant went viral. It spoke of resilience, love, and food as a bridge between worlds. But what caught the most attention was an old photo attached by an anonymous reader, little Aria, beside a smiling woman in a sauce-stained apron. Days later, the man himself showed up. Grey-haired, soft-spoken, notebook in hand. "You don't know me, but I knew your parents," he said, handing her a worn recipe journal. "Your mum gave me this before she passed. She said, maybe one day I'd find you." Time stopped. Aria held the notebook like it was her own heart. The scent, the handwriting, the scribbled notes in the margins. It was all her mother, a woman she barely remembered but never stopped feeling. "I thought I'd lost everything," Aria whispered, tears in her eyes. "But maybe life was just giving it all back, piece by piece." That night, she cooked a forgotten recipe from her childhood. Her hands trembled, but her heart was whole. Connor held Grace in his arms while the little girl laughed and slapped the table, sending flour flying into the air. In the corner of the cafe, Scarlett sat reading a magazine with the headline, "Waitress turned chef moves New York to tears." She gave a faint smile, one that was impossible to read. "So, this is how it ends?" she whispered. "Interesting." The screen fades to black. The camera closes in on Aria's hands, writing in her mother's old notebook. The last line she writes, "Loving is what saved me. Cooking was just the path." Agree. Have you ever helped someone like that, or been helped when you needed it most? Tell us in the comments. I want to hear your story. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this one. Coming up next, you'll meet someone who had to choose between forgiving or disappearing forever.